Hello and welcome to Foreign Dispatches, the program that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Teniola Shubowale. On the program this week, fighting escalates in Afghanistan with civilians bearing the brunt. Plus, the United Nations calls for more aid access to Ethiopia's war-ravaged Tigray. As conflict intensifies in northern Afghanistan and other parts of the country, the UN Refugee Agency warns of an imminent humanitarian crisis, saying failure to reach a peace agreement will see further displacement. Amid an overall increase in civilian casualties, the proportion of women and children affected by violence has risen sharply since January, adding to the toll Afghanistan's decades-long conflict has taken on civilians.
A widowed mother of four struggling to take care of her family is among the 330,000 Afghans displaced since the start of the year by the latest upsurge in fighting. Miriam and her family huddle in the shade of a makeshift shelter in a camp on the outskirts of Mazar-e-Sharif city in northern Afghanistan, seeking respite from the 45 degrees Celsius heat outside. They fled their home to escape clashes between government and opposition forces.
It was hell. Bombs were being dropped. My father was killed there, and a lot of my relatives were killed as well, and we had to flee. I was responsible for my children, and I didn't want them to be killed, so I came here with my elderly mother.
As conflict intensifies in northern Afghanistan and other parts of the country, the UN Refugee Agency warned of an imminent humanitarian crisis, saying failure to reach a peace agreement will see further displacement.
Over the last year, families have been dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic and a devastating drought. And now increased violence in the north and northeast regions is driving more people from their homes every day.
On Tuesday, residents were urged to evacuate the city of Lashkar Gah as the army prepared a major offensive against Taliban insurgents after 3 days of heavy fighting. The United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan says civilians are bearing the brunt of the fighting as at least 40 civilians were killed in 24 hours.
The Afghan people have suffered through decades and decades of conflict. They've suffered through a long period of rule where human rights were blatantly ignored, where women's rights were non-existent, to say the least. We are there to help the Afghan people, but it is up to the Afghan parties to reach a political solution. We and the international community are there to support and guide in whatever way we can, but there needs to be a political solution.
The Taliban have seized control of much of rural Afghanistan since US-led foreign forces began the last stage of withdrawal in May, but are now focused on capturing provincial capitals, where they are meeting stiffer resistance.
Thanks very much. Good afternoon, everyone.
The US and the UK have accused the Taliban of committing possible war crimes by massacring civilians.
We've seen the reports of atrocities being committed by the Taliban in various places where they are on the offensive. And these reports are deeply disturbing and totally unacceptable. And I think it speaks to a larger issue, which is this. The Taliban has repeatedly said that they seek in the future a number of things. International recognition, international support. They want their leaders to be able to travel freely around the world. They would like sanctions lifted on them. And none of those things are going to be possible if the Taliban seeks to take the country by force and commits the kind of atrocities that have been reported. An Afghanistan, as I've said before, that does not respect the basic rights of its people, that does not have a representative and inclusive government, that does not abide by the main gains of the last 20 years, is an Afghanistan that will be a pariah state, certainly for the United States and I believe for the international community.
President Ashraf Ghani on Monday blamed the fast deteriorating security situation in the country on what he describes as the abrupt decision by the United States to withdraw its troops, but said his government had a plan to bring conditions under control within 6 months. Peace talks between the Afghan government and Taliban negotiators started last year in the Qatari capital of Doha, but have not made any substantive progress despite a few rounds. The two sides committed to speeding up the talks. However, at a recent meeting in Doha between a high-level Afghan political delegation and the Taliban. Although nearly all its military forces have left, the United States has continued its air offensive in support of government troops.
The situation is similar in Ethiopia, where the United Nations says 100,000 children are at risk of starvation. It comes amid calls for more aid access to the region. Aid workers have complained that even though Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed declared a unilateral humanitarian ceasefire, aid access in Tigray is as bad as ever, hobbled by insecurity and hurdles.
More than 100,000 children in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region could suffer life-threatening malnutrition in the next 12 months. That's according to the United Nations Children's Agency, who say they are about to run out of the formula used to treat 4,000 severely malnourished children every month.
As UNICEF reaches areas of Tigray that were inaccessible in past months due to insecurity, our worst fears about the health and well-being of children in that conflicted region of northern Ethiopia are being confirmed. UNICEF estimates that over 100,000 children in Tigray could suffer from life-threatening severe acute malnutrition in the next 12 months, a 10-fold increase compared to the average annual caseload.
Fighting began between the Ethiopian central government and the Tigray People's Liberation Front last November. The TPLF recaptured most of its home region in June and July, but most aid is blocked. UNICEF says children, women and other civilians bear the scars of the conflict and trauma endured.
For example, we spoke to one young woman who is a survivor of sexual assault. She watched her grandmother get killed. She was raped by several men as she watched her 9-month-old baby being tossed around by other men. And what the doctor at IDER, at this UNICEF-supported referral center in Mekelle said, which also struck me, was that in many cases it's not the assault itself that is the worst part, but it is the psychological damage that people now have to deal with for a very long time.
7, 8.
The World Food Programme says it's been 2 weeks since a convoy was able to enter the Tigray regional capital, Mekelle.
It has been more than 2 weeks since a WFP-led convoy made its way to Mekelle in Tigray. A convoy of over 200 trucks is on its way now from Semera to Mekelle. This is a drop in the ocean. We need at least 100 trucks to be making their way every day into Tigray if we are to stand a chance to reverse the catastrophic situation which you have had today.
The UN urges the Ethiopian government to grant permission as well as longer visas for aid workers.
We can say that this communication equipment is only for humanitarian purposes, in a neutral, independent, impartial manner in order to carry out our operations. We need satellite phones, for example. We need that communication equipment to go in. So we don't know why that is not happening. We can only say we need this and we need those permissions, please.
Ethiopia insists that any barriers to access for aid groups to the Tigray region are being closely monitored by the government.
And in South Africa, in the aftermath of the violence and looting that rocked parts of the country last month, Nigeria's Consul General in South Africa is looking to the Nigerian government and citizens who can to help support those who lost their businesses. Although the South African government has set aside 3.9 billion rand to support these small and medium-scale businesses, many foreign-owned businesses are worried that help will still be far from them. Our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia, has the story.
As South Africa counts the cost of the many days of looting and arson attacks on several businesses in 2 provinces in the country, many who are still worried about where to go or what to do next are some of the small and medium-sized owned businesses, especially those owned by foreign nationals. Here we're in Denver, an industrial area in Johannesburg, where we're here to see what is left of L&K auto panel beaters, owned by a 46-year-old Nigerian, Lukman Alade, who said he lost close to 9 million rand in looted property and then in the arson attack.
I just got a call around 1 o'clock in the midnight that, hey, my son has been looting. So I came out. When I came here, I saw that it's not only looting, there's a fire. And they burned all the car inside here, almost 54 cars. So that's what we see that day.
Lukman Alade is just one of the many affected Nigerian business owners. In KwaZulu-Natal, the second affected province, the stories are no less heartbreaking.
That suffered it cuts across all nationals, not just Nigerians, even white South Africans, Indian South Africans, even black South Africans, Ethiopians and Somalians that run most of the talk shops around, the spaza shops, and then Nigerians also. Many Nigerians lost their businesses. They were burnt down, some in exchange businesses. A very pitiable case, again, is a certain Nigerian, interestingly married to an Indian South African. He did not only run the business, but also ran some kind of like a mini warehouse where some of the hawkers on the street will come store things in his place. So all those all those things that they came to keep in his place overnight, they do this they do every day. They took everything, destroyed his own businesses, his own wares, and everything that he was doing. And those people are insisting that he must also restore their goods.
Armed with a list of Nigerian businesses either looted and burnt or just looted, Nigeria's Consul General in Johannesburg, Abdul Malik Ahmed, is reaching out for help on their behalf.
So we call upon the Nigerian government and many Nigerians to come to their aid. You know, the records we have are actually conservative because most of them were not even willing to divulge, their losses because of their frustration. They said even if they did, nobody's going to come to their aid. But we continue to reassure them that, we are going to prevail and present their case to government, appropriate quarters.
But here in South Africa, 3.9 billion rand has been set aside to help. And government says foreign and locally owned businesses would be helped if they meet conditions.
We are looking at providing what we call blended finance, which is 60% grant and then 40% loan. We are also looking at ensuring that at least the initial payment moratorium is for up to a maximum of 12 months. And then the repayment of a maximum of 60 months. We try to make the requirements very, very simple, but we have to make sure that we are also still compliant with SARS. We are engaging with SARS. We want to make sure that we also have businesses that are formalized because we cannot support people who don't want to be known because we have to account at the end of the day because we're utilizing taxpayers' money.
Lukman Alade confirms he's been reached somewhat.
Yeah, they came here, they gave us some form to fill, like claim something, so we're still expecting them. We don't know what's going to happen, but we can't wait for them. We just need to move forward to start doing our job back.
Whether help will eventually come, many remain hopeful. For now, Lukman is literally picking up the pieces of what's left of his business to start again at a totally different location, armed with only hope and his 14-year-old daughter's words.
When that thing happened that day when I'm about to give up, it's my daughter just told me, no, Daddy, don't worry, you will do it again. And when I hear that voice, when my daughter said like that, I just get my strength back. I said.
From Denver, Johannesburg, South Africa, Betty Dibia for Foreign Dispatches.
Also picking up the pieces, Lebanon marks 1 year since Beirut port explosion in which over 200 people were killed. That's after the break. Please stay with us. You're still watching Foreign Dispatches on Channels Television. Lebanon marked the first anniversary of the deadly Beirut port explosion this week, with residents expressing anger and sadness in a city where many are still in mourning and demanding justice. 1 year since the blast, no top official has been held to account, angering many Lebanese as their country suffers from crippling financial collapse. Many survivors say they are still haunted by the explosion.
Baby George Nazer is as old as the Beirut port blast. His mother was in labor on August the 4th last year when a stockpile of ammonium nitrate stored unsafely for years exploded in the Lebanese capital, crashing whole windows onto her bed. Emmanuel Latif Nazer went on to give birth to her first child under torchlight in the corridor of the destroyed St. George Hospital University Medical Center. 1 year later, Emmanuel and her husband Edmund Nazer say their son was a symbol of life, bringing hope to people in Lebanon.
George was a symbol of life.
George was a symbol of life for people. Many took strength from him after the blast. We met people after the blast who were themselves affected by the blast. When they heard about George, they would be happy. They would honestly forget their stories. It was nice. George gave a lot of hope to people in Lebanon.
The blast, one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history, killed more than 200, injured thousands, and destroyed large swathes of the capital. Survivor Shadi Risk remembers August the 4th, 2020 like it was yesterday. The explosion occurred just moments from his office. He now considers the day of his near-death experience as his rebirth.
I don't
feel like a year has passed. Felt like it has been a few days or moments, in the blink of an eye. It's been a year since the explosion, but time has stopped completely. Every day is August 4th. Every day. I remember the blast every day.
His doctor is still extracting glass from his body, and even though many of his scars have been treated, he says he's still healing both physically and mentally. And for Lebanese doctor Isra Seblani, August the 4th, 2020 was meant to be the wedding day she had always dreamed of, but it quickly turned into a nightmare. Isra was standing radiant in a square in Beirut that afternoon after marrying businessman Ahmed Subay when the scene was shattered by a deafening roar and a powerful shockwave that nearly blew her off her feet. The couple are so haunted by the memories of the blast that they do not have a photo of their wedding on display. Like Shadi Risk, the couple say they soon hope to leave Lebanon to escape the economic crisis there. Lebanon is still reeling from the aftermath of the explosion and also suffering from a financial crisis, one the World Bank has dubbed one of the deepest depressions of modern history. A sculpture of a giant angular figure made from the wreckage of last summer's Beirut port blast was unveiled at the site on Monday, August the 2nd, drawing support from some but also stoking anger among other Lebanese who believe justice should come before memorials.
So you have a giant made out of ashes. You have a giant made of the scars of the city, made out of the scars of people whose wounds did not yet close. All these people, all the parents of those families of, the martyrs and the victims have their wounds still open.
The killers have complete impunity of their crime, and we're already pretending that something is past and that we're trying to transcend it through art, and I'm against that. On top of it, I feel this is a crime scene, and the crime scene cannot be touched yet. It has to be investigated. You don't come and make an event and money off of a crime scene still on the bodies of the people that died there.
A report released by Human Rights Watch on Tuesday concluded there was strong evidence to suggest some Lebanese officials knew about and tacitly accepted the lethal risk posed by ammonium nitrate stored at Beirut port before the fatal blast there on August the 4th last year. The investigation also concluded there was evidence that multiple Lebanese authorities were criminally negligent under Lebanese law.
Prime Minister Hassan Diab was made aware of the ammonium nitrate twice. He was first informed on June 3, while Diab's advisor was at the private dinner that Saliba was also at. While Diab and Saliba both dispute the circumstances by which it happened, both of them have confirmed to Human Rights Watch that the Prime Minister learned about the ammonium nitrate on June 3 via phone. Given all of this evidence, we find that government and high-level security officials failed to take the action necessary to remove the dangerous ammonium nitrate from the center of a busy residential area in the middle of a densely populated capital city, creating an unacceptable risk to life and violating Lebanon's international human rights obligations.
Human Rights Watch calls on the United Nations Human Rights Council to mandate an investigation into the blast and on foreign governments to impose human rights and corruption sanctions on officials. A Lebanese investigation into the blast led by Judge Tarek Bitar has stalled. Politicians and senior security officials are yet to be questioned, and requests to lift their immunity have been hindered. In a televised speech on the eve of the anniversary, Lebanon's President Michel Aoun said he was fully supportive of an impartial investigation and said he was for a strong judiciary that will not back down when questioning any officials, no matter how high they ranked. Cleanup in the Lebanese capital started right after the explosion and is still going on. But while most streets are now clear of rubble and many houses are being renovated, scars on buildings and streets still remain. The wrecked grain silos in the port, an iconic image at the time, still look as they did soon after the blast, with many other buildings in the area still in a state of collapse.
And finally on the program, when visually impaired sisters and mothers Reem and Elam Abdul Karim would first try to use their kitchens, their families would accompany them, saying it's unsafe for them to cook without supervision. But today, a cookbook written in Braille has come to their rescue. The recipes require the use of only 4 human senses: touch, smell, hearing, and taste.
A cookbook that is specially designed for their disability has become a gateway for independence and self-sufficiency.
My hobby is cooking. I would write the recipe, cook it, and photograph it. I wanted it to be something unique that helps the community. If we put our finger on a problem that exists in the society and fix it, then we will be providing something special that has value.
The book is written in Braille and contains recipes and instructions that solely focus on the visually impaired's 4 main senses: touch, smell, hearing, and taste. For example, instead of watching water boil in a pan, users are told to wait and listen to the sound of simmering bubbles.
Before finding the cookbook, I used to have to ask people to tell me what the color of the meat or the macaroni was. I would ask them if the sauce was heavy or light. But because of how much I read the book, I really understood how it works. It really explains how we can determine all these things on our own.
El Husseini launched her book around a year ago, but has only so far printed a handful of copies that she distributes to friends.
The book was the solution. I feel like it helped my mother a lot. I think it's a good thing. And I'm glad that my mom was able to use the kitchen on her own, doing everything without needing my help.
She hopes to partner with a publishing house in order to make it accessible to the wider population.
Well, this is where we say goodbye till next time. Remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you so much for watching the program. I'm Tenyola Shoboale. Stay safe.